person's hard case is not a hard case for another, and you're trying to describe, and pretty soon the door just opens because the evil one wants to whisper in our ears and open that can. I know I opened this can of worms earlier, so I've got to bring it back. Good old Henry VIII. How do Anglicans look in the mirror and look at how their whole tradition started?
Okay, if you ask a Lutheran, when did the Lutheran Reformation occur, they'll point to the 1520s and to one figure, Martin Luther, and it ends shortly after his death with basically the completion of the Lutheran confessions. If you ask an Anglo-Catholic to describe the Anglican Reformation, they will talk about a process that starts with Henry, but doesn't end until James II, almost 200 years, during which things started in a very Catholic way. I think one of the reasons why most of the English bishops didn't oppose Henry, but stayed with him even after he separated from the Catholic Church, was simply that this kind of thing had happened before in the history of England and of Europe. And, eventually they get over it, things come right, and we're Catholics again. I think that Thomas More and Bishop Fisher saw wisely that things had changed, the nature of the nation state had changed, and that wasn't true anymore. But Henry made no changes in doctrine. The change in liturgy was that you prayed for the king instead of for the pope. Henry faced opposition, and that opposition was particularly visible in some of the religious communities. Anglicans, like myself, would say, Henry really didn't have it in for the religious communities, but when the religious communities seemed to be supporting those who opposed him, he came down hard, and he had the added advantage of having Downton Abbeys to hand out to people who then became his creatures, loyal to him. With Henry's death, there was a very Protestant regency. Archbishop Cranmer got his opportunity to impose a new liturgy, and a liturgy that was, despite fairly traditional language, really an expression of justification by faith alone, according to the liturgist Dom Gregory Dix. Elizabeth brings a little bit more balance between the old ways and the new, but Elizabeth's birth is in question. Thus, the legitimacy of her reign is in question. The Pope excommunicates her. As a consequence, Catholics are traitors because they're a threat to her crown. And you begin the awful persecution of Catholics in general, but also, in particular, of any Catholic priest who came into the country to serve those Catholics. With the Jameses and the Charleses, you have more of a return to the more Catholic side of Anglicanism. And so people like to say that, when the English Reformation was completed under James II, you had a reformed Catholicism. I think that there is substance to the arguments that have been offered. If you go back and read the Oxford divines from the 19th century, the people who led the Oxford movement, including Newman himself, I think that there is substance to their argument. John Keble, who set that movement off, basically said the Anglican Church today has lost its identity and is in grave problems. We need to reclaim that identity. And his identity was the Catholic Church moderately reformed. Today, however, what we find is that more and more the things that he would point to, or did point to, as the Catholic belief of Anglicans are marginalized or really have been done away with. I've sometimes have been asked by the press, from whom I try to stay away, that about the hot-button issues, ordination of women, the sexuality stuff. But there has really been, as well, a kind of demeaning of what Anglicans are wont to call core doctrine. People who say the creed because that's part of our historic identity, but we don't believe these things that the creed says. And that, for me, was the hardest part.
Yeah, and I mean, during the time of, what a fascinating subject. Thank you for summarizing that. It really is.